And we are live. Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen. I'm one of your co-hosts, Blake Ruffino. Alongside me is my counterpart, Joe DeLeone. Good evening, good sir. How are you?
Blake, I got two things for you as we start today's show. One, I have to admit first, this is one of the few shows that I'm going to loathe doing with you because I am fully expecting to have to admit that I was wrong on a lot of things. And I hate that. That really bothers me. I hate being wrong, especially against you. And you know what I'm referring to. You know which shit I'm referring to.
Are you referring to Indiana?
Well, also the Colorado game.
Or hold on. Or like you and all the Colorado fans, which, by the way, that video with all the Colorado content we did this week got about 20,000 views. Are you talking about me saying that Colorado was going to get run over in the running game? Or are you talking about that part? Oh, hold on 1 second. Breaking news. Devin Neal just scored again.
I brought this up first. I brought this up first to let you get your victory lap in. I wanted you to get it in first.
You're glad I didn't clip anything this week. But, again, to my point, listen, the not running the football and in time of possession was always going to catch up to them. This was the game that I was like, man, if somebody's going to clip them, it's going to be Kansas, and it wound up happening.
I thought if it was going to happen, it would have happened in the playoff. I'm a little bit disappointed, and I'll save my thoughts for the Colorado game because we're gonna get to that today. The second thing I want to bring up was something that I tweeted yesterday, and I think that this is a nice precursor for the discussion today. It serves as a precursor for the discussion for when the playoff seeding is released on Tuesday. I firmly believe that there's really no correct answer with the expanded playoff on which 12 teams belong in. And I feel like that there's a lot of people out there that are speaking and setting so many things in stone. And we've got a whole nother week of football left. We've got conference championships left. I think that there are so many different arguments that could be made for 3 ACC teams. There's arguments that could be made for a team like South Carolina getting into the mix.
Oh, stop.
Hold on. Wait, let me finish. I'm saying that to say that there is not a correct answer. I would prefer not to have a 3-loss team get into this playoff field, but we're in a really weird position after the way that this slate of games played out yesterday.
Stop. I told you about South Carolina on Wednesday's show.
I'm not admitting you're right. I'm saying that there is an argument for it.
If they beat Clemson and 4 of their last 5 wins come against ranked opponents, and you do not put them in, I am going to blow a gasket. And now I have no affiliation to South Carolina, 0. But there comes a time when I say, listen, Joe, there's nobody else in the country that has their resume. Nobody. Nobody has their strength of schedule. Nobody has the wins over ranked opponents. So again, to the point, I understand that they have 3 conference losses to ranked opponents. They also will have 3 conference wins over 3 ranked opponents. And if they beat Clemson this week, which they got to beat Clemson, I'm telling you, man, I'm putting them in.
Okay, so here's my deal with that. I came to this conclusion yesterday that if there is a 3-loss team that is worthy of getting into the mix, it has to be one that all 3 of their losses are to ranked teams. South Carolina right now is the only team that fits that description. So you are right, and this plays into my whole theme and that I'm going to share for the next 2-3 weeks, that there can be arguments made for a lot of different teams. I just firmly believe, and I'm going to save this more so for Tuesday when we really get into it, I don't think that we should put a 3-loss team in regardless of conference. And I think that the way that the SEC played yesterday might have boxed themselves out, because just as we could make the argument for South Carolina, we have to bring up the fact that
their lost Ole Miss and Bama.
They lost badly to Ole Miss. They lost like pretty handily to Ole Miss by multiple scores, and those teams lost yesterday, completely ruining their argument of getting in. South Carolina's best scenario would have been if Alabama and Ole Miss won yesterday and Texas A&M lost the way that they did. I think that now creates a really just messy situation.
Well, you're right on that, and we'll talk about that too. But it's not the only bludgeoning that the SEC took. Indiana also took a bludgeoning. We'll start off with that one first. Joe, again, on Monday, I was kind of, because McLaughlin went down, Wednesday I got a little hesitant because I don't like when centers go down. Didn't affect what I talked about on Monday. The line of scrimmage was always going to be the deciding factor in this game, and Ohio State completely dominated from start to finish on the line of scrimmage. I know there were some times here or there, and we'll walk through that one. But, Joe, I got to be real with you. I know Big Ten fans are going to be upset with me. There's no way I have Indiana in right now, even after the chaos in the SEC. There's no way.
The problem is those that we're running out of teams. That would imply that you would put Ole Miss in after the way that they played yesterday.
I would put in Ole Miss.
Oh, no. Blake. They have a loss to Kentucky and to Florida now. Like, we can't put them in.
Joe, think about this. Indiana, their strength of record, for an example, they are below 40% or 400 teams outside of Ohio State. I understand what you're saying, but now we're getting to a place where the teams that they play besides Ohio State, and then after getting bludgeoned the way that they did, Joe, not only would everybody have to win out, there's no way outside of Ohio State that they face a winning record team at all. So I understand what you're saying. Okay. I know that I am in the minority on this, and I'm okay with being in the minority and being wrong. But I don't think it's fair for one team to face 7 ranked opponents and lose 2 games or 3 games. Then you get to a place where another team has not faced winning teams with winning records. Okay. I mean, like that. There has to be something about that, man. Has to be.
I will come in here and say that I can't defend Indiana's performance yesterday. Like, I'm not going to try and prop them up. You'd have to be insane to prop them up and to find a positive with the way that they played. They played very poorly. The game got away from them, and we're going to unpack that in a second. But at the same time, a team with 1 loss in the second best conference in college football getting pushed out because they played on the road and they got their asses kicked. Like the same thing could be brought up with Texas. Texas obviously has a stronger resume. They have a stronger resume. They've played some tougher teams than Indiana has. They do not have the same type of resume and schedule that Indiana played, but their singular loss right now is by multiple scores, where it felt like they were out of it for most of the game against Georgia.
The problem
is where we're getting into problems.
No, the problem that you have with Texas is they're going to face a ranked opponent this week versus A&M, and let's just say hypothetically they win that game, then they'll face another ranked opponent, which will be Georgia.
Yes.
So again,
but this continues to play into it though, that I don't think that there is a right answer for this, but I think
there is a right answer. There is a right answer.
At the very least, my biggest issue with the whole SEC support and why we keep yelling at each other and why I'm starting to push away from a spot where I used to agree with you, Blake, is that yes, there have been more difficult games on some of these teams' schedules, but when you're losing those games, that has to be counted towards something. Indiana was winning all of their games on their schedule still, besides Ohio State.
The last point, the record of the teams that they've played outside of Ohio State is below 400.
I understand that.
No. So for Ole Miss's sake, it's above 600.
But they still have 3 losses. They couldn't.
I don't give a shit.
Win through their schedule. You got to win the games that you play.
Joe, that is the dumbest. And I love.
No, it's not. No, it's not. It's not a dumb. It's not a dumb argument because the way that you and other SEC fans keep framing
I'm
this
not
is,
an SEC fan.
I know that you're an LSU fan, and you're
Joe, if Texas loses to A&M, they deserve to be out. I'm not going to defend a team in Texas. Okay.
Well, no, they don't deserve to be out because
they don't deserve to be in there. But at the same time, when I look at a team that has not faced another team outside of the one they just lost to with a winning record, and you're trying to tell me, oh, it's because they're in a conference. You literally just said, you called me a SEC guy. Oh, well, they're in the second best conference. Who gives a shit?
But Blake,
you're trying to tell me that I'm a homer when you just labeled the Big Ten. And because they're in the Big Ten, they're getting in.
There's no homerism though. I have no ties to any Big Ten teams, so that first of all,
it doesn't matter, though.
But what I'm trying to say here is that if we had all of these teams, say all of these teams were 10-2, I'd be on board with what you're putting out there. I 1000% would be on board. Like, you know what? You're right. All of these teams have the same record, and we have to pick and decide which teams belong in and which need to be taken out because they all have the same record. But the problem is now
Ole Miss, Indiana line up today. Who you taking?
I can't confidently say Ole Miss. I can't. I think that Ole Miss would win, but the way that they played like shit against Florida, like how am I supposed to say that in Kentucky? How am I supposed to say that they're going to show up and play to their potential? I can't.
You're defending a point that you wouldn't even agree with. Everybody in the chat, who are you taking?
And everybody, we have a heavy SEC footprint. They're all and an Ohio State footprint. They're all going to agree with
their
you.
Mama is going to pick Ole Miss in that scenario. And if you pick Indiana, you're a lying sack of shit. Don't you dare come at me.
No.
Here's a 3-loss team. Who you taking right now, Indiana or South Carolina? And if you don't take South Carolina, you're going to be a dumbass.
I'm not. That doesn't make me a dumbass. Wait. At home, Ohio State beats Indiana by 23 points. South Carolina is not comparable. Hold on. South Carolina would not play Ohio State that closely. South Carolina is closer to Indiana than you think that they are. The way that you're framing
this, bullshit touchdown. Of their 12 possessions, they had 7 3-and-outs. Don't you dare come here and tell me that they played them close.
I didn't say that they played them close. That's not what I just said. You're framing it as no. That's not what I just said. You're framing this as if Ole Miss and South Carolina would beat Indiana as badly as Ohio State just did, and then that wouldn't be the case at all. That wouldn't be the case at all. Ohio State would win both of those matchups.
I saw Ohio State sack Indiana 5 times, and we're about to talk about that. What do you think that D-line at South Carolina is going to do? I know what they're going to do. They're going to kill him. They're going to kill him.
All right. We got games we got to get to before we.
Yeah, you always like to argue. I'm gonna call you my second wife.
Well, it's a good warm up at the beginning of the show. That's also don't do that. That's
all right.
Mildly perverted.
By the way, I swear to God, this isn't gonna. You know what would settle all of this? If the Big 12
play into the playoff.
No. If the Big 12 and a Group of 5 team didn't get in the playoff,
that's true. Yeah, actually, I can't disagree with that. Maybe a Big 12 team, but no, Boise State does not belong in there.
Arizona State's going to get a bye, brother. It's coming. You better get ready for it. All right, let's get rolling here. Yeah. Everybody do us a favor by hitting the like and share to all those groups. If you're on Facebook, share to all those social media pages. You're watching us, listening to us on YouTube, like, subscribe, notification bell, wherever you listen to podcasts. Rate, review, and subscribe. Joe, let's talk about our good friends over at betonline.ag. When we come back, we break down Ohio State, Indiana. Next, stay with us. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way for you to wager on all of your favorite sports, contests, events with the first-to-market odds and lines. Find reviews for all the news for each league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, college sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all of your sports information for live in-game betting, props, and futures. Head on over to BetOnline today and use your mobile device to join and make your first sports bet. Use our promo code BELIEVE50, that's BELIEVE50, BLEAV 50, to receive your 50% off welcome bonus on your first deposit. That's betonline.ag, betonline.ag. We're back. All right. Beef Stick with a $2 super chat says, hey, Blake, your SEC got their shit pushed in. Go Notre Dame. Look, Joe, hold on. This is why people in the country don't like Notre Dame people. You ready? Because you play Army, and then you come in here and say, oh, what about the SEC?
Wait. This comment has nothing to do with Army, though. Beef Stick's got nothing to say about Army. He just said, go Notre Dame, and it's because SEC fans shit on Notre Dame all the time. That's all it is.
Why weren't Notre Dame fans in here when they got their shit pushed in by NIU?
Because we were embarrassed.
Okay, then get the fuck out of my face.
All I'm saying is that if SEC fans talk shit about us, why can't we talk shit back?
Because you also, outside of Texas A&M and NIU, barely, with Louisville too, are not going to have a schedule with teams above 500.
If we get an opportunity to talk shit, I think that we should. That's all I'm saying.
Well, play teams above 500 and be somebody before you join a
We will in the playoff. We will in the playoff.
Grow chest hair.
We will in the playoff.
Uh-huh. Yeah, and you're going to get your shit pushed in. Watch. I guarantee you're going to get your shit pushed in. Guarantee.
Not if we get Penn State. We're going to beat Penn State.
That's a non-SEC school, clearly, to the conversation that we're having here. All right. Let's get moving. Joe, Ohio State beats Indiana yesterday, and a really kind of early part of that game was, I think, Ohio State fans were like, oh, man, what's about to happen? And then all of a sudden, I thought Will Howard turned it on, turned it out, and Ohio State is able to take over and win against Indiana. Joe, I want to start off here with this. If you did not watch the game and you see the final score, you see 38-15, you probably say to yourselves, oh, okay, maybe, Ohio State gets a score late, a little bit closer than what it was. Joe, after the touchdown that Indiana had to start off the game, their first offensive drive, they had a punt, a fumble, a turnover on downs, end of half, block punt, touchdown. So for 39 minutes of that game, they got physically dominated. Rourke got sacked 5 times. Simon had 2.5 sacks. And what was a line of scrimmage, how do I want to say this? Masterclass by Ohio State in their win versus Indiana.
Yeah, Ohio State did a really good job of not just stepping into a matchup where they knew that they had an athletic advantage along the line of scrimmage and just saying, no, we're just going to send 4 and we're going to see what we can produce. Knowles was really aggressive. He was sending a ton of pressure. And I tweeted this out. I really think that when you go into this matchup against Oregon, it was one of the things that they chose not to do. And I think that they were really arrogant coming into that matchup thinking like, oh, our guys are going to get home. No, you have the athletes to send pressure and produce disruptive plays on a snap-to-snap basis. I think that you have figured out the recipe for success in the playoff. If you can do that to Indiana, you're going to be able to win playoff games and go on a run and to maybe even win the Big Ten championship game in a couple of weeks. Talking about Indiana first, just to get them out of the way, because personally, my biggest takeaway here is with Ohio State and for how they played. Indiana was certainly pushed around. Ohio State was able to have pretty early success running the football, and it just started to snowball after that first scoring drive for Indiana. But man, Indiana just did not come to play the way that they needed to. It looked great on that first drive, but the mistakes started to mount and to mount and to mount to the point where there was no escaping. When you're in a matchup like this where there is such an athletic advantage for your opponent, you have to almost play perfectly. Like you have to play a super clean game. You have to be great in pass protection and picking up any pressures. You can't have any special teams errors. The punter for Indiana completely screwed him, not only with the muff snap that he had, but also where he placed that second punt, completely outkicked the coverage. Yes. You're not supposed to place the ball to the opposite hash. You're supposed to place the ball to right. You're supposed to put it on the short side of the field to give your coverage team room to rally to the football. So Caleb Downs was set up perfectly. A lot of short fields helped Ohio State score as easily as they did. Indiana did not come to play, I think, to the degree that we were expecting.
Oh, no. Stop. I, on Monday, said I thought it was going to be an ass whipping. And to be honest with you, did I not?
It was not directed at you. It was towards the Indiana supporters is what I
gotcha. It was an ass whooping because I know what the line of scrimmages were going to look like. I had a pretty good idea. Now, McLaughlin went down, kind of got me a little skittish on Wednesday. But, Joe, this was a line of scrimmage game. And I think that this is the part where when we talked about Indiana, when they played Michigan and it was the most physical team that they played and they also looked the exact same way that they looked yesterday. I'm like, look, man, I know that you're about to play a really physical team. And even when they got down late, like I was joking with you on Twitter and I'm like, I'm so glad I took Indiana. Joe just overwhelmed them. Now I'm going to go back to your point right here quickly. This is what I think about like Oregon versus this one. I think it's the opposite of what you said about they thought that they could get home with 4. No, I think what happened was Oregon has dudes on the outside, and you have a guy like Gabriel that can toss the ball around. So they wanted to play coverage and try to play better coverage. I think yesterday, what I continue to see was we're going to play man on man. We're going to send heat, and we're going to make Curtis Rourke beat us. If you can throw, our DBs are better than what you have at receiver. And they kept doing it all night, over and over and over again. Joe, they're putting Caleb Downs on a slot receiver and saying, hey, we're going to put a safety on your slot, and you're not going to be able to throw the ball. Coverage was so good for Ohio State against Indiana that the pressure was able to get to Rourke. To be honest with you, I don't blame – I saw some people blaming Curtis Rourke on social media. What for? Because there's no space. There's nowhere he could go. I mean, the kid's been really good at decision-making all year. You got locked down. You got dominated. It was a really good – look, Ryan Day takes a lot of shit. But one thing that they did, to your point, they did not go out. They were not going to go out in their shield. They went after Curtis Rourke over and over again. He was 8 of 18, Joe. He had 68 yards passing. And that's the part for me that I'm like, yeah, man, I mean, you bludgeoned them. Now, I think Curt Cignetti, who we've given a lot of credit for throughout the season, got in a big-time situation. And I got to be real with you, Joe. I thought he got a little out-coached. I mean, it's not like Lawton wasn't – well, I mean, Joe, if I'm being real with you, Lawton had 15 carries for 80 yards and 2 touchdowns. You completely got away from running the football.
That was the biggest thing for me. They were having success. Yeah.
And if I'm an Ohio State fan, I'm like, well, look, man, there is one thing that Indiana on that first drive, and when they had success, I mean, it's not like Lawton throughout the game. Joe, I went just because I knew Ohio State fans would say, well, he had, a long drive late. He averaged 6 yards a carry from the second quarter and the third quarter. So it's not as if that they weren't running the football. They overwhelmed them. But I got to tell you this, Joe, I keep telling you about Will Howard, man, and the streaky stuff that he goes on. 15 straight passes that he completed on, then the wet ball, the tip, and the interception. So he ends the game 21 of 23 with 2 touchdowns and a pick. He's got weapons. I'm not saying he is a perennial all-star quarterback. He's just got serious dudes. Joe, he was going to his third progression read and Cornell Tate early in the game, and Cornell Tate is making plays. I mean, he's got Smith. He's got Mbuka. It's just what they have on the outside and the efficiency. Not saying he's dominant. The efficiency that he plays with is just why Ohio State might be, if they can get a little bit healthier, and I know their O-line's beat up, Joe, they are one of the most complete teams in all of college football.
Before I jump on that Ohio State point, Indiana's decision to completely get away from running the football was very frustrating because that was by far their most successful yard production in this game. They were not averaging a ton of EPA per rush, but like that was the only thing statistically that was in the green for them. And they actually, in the red zone, they were more successful than Ohio State, something that would be completely missed if you watch this game and you just kind of were paying attention to the flow of it. But those early downs where they kept trying to throw the ball in situations where it wasn't working, Ohio State completely overwhelmed them.
Mm-hmm.
What makes Ohio State so great and why they feel like they're that second best team right now, and if they beat Oregon, they should move up to the top and be the number 1 team in the country, is for the way that you just described it. I have said this since the beginning of the season, and this talking point has been misconstrued by Ohio State fans. Elks, I know that he's sometimes serious about this, and we kind of joke back and forth, but I keep bringing up, or we keep talking about my perception on Will Howard. The way that you just described Will Howard is how I've always talked about him. He is not ever going to be the guy that is going to make the unreal throw in the tight window.
Well, he made some yesterday, though.
I know that he did, but he's not Jaden Daniels. He's not Bryce Young. He's not Caleb Williams. He's not going to win the Heisman and make the ridiculous play. He's not Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward. He's none of those guys. But around this roster, he's the right man for this team to win a national championship.
I agree.
He's the right guy in the circumstance to deliver the ball to all these playmakers that he has, hand the ball off to all these different running backs. He just needs his teammates to rally around him. when they lost to Oregon, it was because that final drive solely fell on his shoulders. And it felt like it was just a little bit too much for him to finish that game
not
off.
built for that. And to be
That's
honest,
what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
and
We
to be
shouldn't hold
fair-
that against him.
To be fair, I mean,
Not every quarterback has to be a premier Heisman guy.
Well, Stetson Bennett. So, I mean,
yeah, exactly.
He's a more athletic Stetson's pretty athletic. I don't know.
He's a bigger version of him.
But I look at the OPI at the end of that Oregon game. I mean, Joe, he was moving them all the way down the field. I mean, I know he had a bad situation there late, and but
that plays into it though, is that a crucial mistake by a young player on his team, while he was doing everything that he was just doing his job. He wasn't necessarily like really truly exceeding it. He was doing his job.
He does his job exceptionally well then.
Exactly.
Because,
that's what I'm saying.
Joe, there's another high-profile game when I look at Will Howard. Here's one thing you didn't mention, though, that I want to bring up. At Kansas State, he had a lot of turnovers. He's making right decisions. And this is what happens.
Being set up better.
Well, yeah, but he's got dudes. When you have dudes all around you, okay, like the interception's bullshit to me. I'm don't
count that. I don't count. That was a very lucky bounce, heads up play by the defender. Like I don't hold that against him.
Right. Guy turns his head around, hits his right hand, bounces up. It's a pick. It's a right read. It just goes against the stat line. I think this is about a perfect of a game, by the way, in bad weather that you could play as a quarterback. Now, let me ask you this about Ohio State. Look, their front seven was insane. We've seen them go up against Oregon. I mean, again, I could make the debate either way for Oregon and Ohio State right now. I mean, you play one team on the road, okay? You lost by one. I think Ohio State or Oregon could be the best player in the best teams in the country here. But, Joe, here's the thing that I ask you. Are you a little worried that Quinshon Judkins hasn't kind of been able to get going, or was not able to get going in this one? I know that Henderson was pretty efficient, had the scoring touchdown, had 68 yards. Like, I get all of that. You a little worried about Judkins here in the running game in some instances?
Not necessarily, because this is the whole reason why you have both of these players. You have the opportunity to turn to either guy based on who's the hot hand and who's becoming the most successful. 14 carries for 36 yards is way under the expectation of what we thought he was going to be doing in a game like this. But the fact that when they're prepared to stop when they're prepared to stop Judkins, Henderson is a different style of player. He is the guy who's going to kill you in space when Judkins is going to try and run you over. You give the ball to the other guy, and he's going to be able to produce off of less carries. This is another facet for the whole talking point of what makes Ohio State truly dangerous to be one of those few teams that looks like a national championship winning team in a year where there's not a clear-cut favorite, is that when one player doesn't play as their best, that there's another option. I mean, I'd go as far as to even bring up in the conversation we're having here where Jeremiah Smith on 5 targets only has 34 yards, and Carnell Tate, who is a good player, isn't necessarily the best receiver in this group, as a former highly touted recruit. He has 68 yards. Emeka Ibuka has a big game for 80 yards. All the different options is what makes them such a premier team. That's what's holding back some of these other teams that we thought were going to be great that have slipped up, is that whenever that top player goes down and they're unavailable, they've hindered. They've taken that step backwards. Like the first thing that comes to mind is Ole Miss. When Trey Harris is unavailable, their offense isn't as good, and Trey Harris gets banged up in the Florida game. I know that we're going a little step too far, but having this many options is same thing with Oregon. It makes them so tough to stop because you can always turn to somebody new.
I want to talk about Ohio State's defense before we turn the page here. They allowed 153 yards. So this is how I perceive it in my mind. I know you're going to yell at me, but I'm not going to fight you on this. I am told that Indiana is a playoff caliber team, right or wrong. The outside world is telling me that they're a playoff team, correct? They just held a playoff team to 153 yards. By the way, in that, one player had 179 of those yards. So, in meaning, Joe, not only did they lock down stuff yesterday defensively, they locked everybody down besides one dude, and they contained him. So there comes a part here. Everybody wants to talk about Ohio State and what they did. Defensively is where they were the most dominant yesterday. Caleb Downs, I mean, look, I hate to say this in the wrong way. I saw a lot of people tweeting this yesterday. Like, oh man, I hadn't seen Caleb Downs in a while. Well, did you see him now? Because he's been good. He will continue to be good. He's that dude. He is that guy, and that's why you go get a dude like that. Man, I'm so impressed with them defensively. The game that they called, and just the overall sheer of how they attacked and what they did. Man, it was a pure domination. So, again, you did that on a playoff team, and that's the part where I'm saying. Not only did you do that against Indiana, I'm supposed to be told, too, that Penn State was another one of those teams that is a playoff caliber team, and now you've done it to 2 playoff teams in a month.
Well, so that's what I think gets missed in the whole conversation about recapping this game. I think a lot of people were super quick, and this happens a lot with Ohio State, admittedly, and this is kind of like me giving them –
Well, because they have all the toys on offense, and then we want to get there, and we don't talk about how dominant they're being defensively.
What I'm trying to get at here is that everyone was so hung up on crapping all over Indiana that I think that you're right that we do need to give love for the defensive performance by Ohio State. Like, that is something I didn't hear talked about by anybody. I feel like I didn't hear anybody mentioning that. It was all Indiana. Kurt Signetti, how he made all these brash comments in the offseason and he didn't live up to them and all that stuff. But can we give credit to Ohio State for just playing their ass off on defense? That's something that needs to be recognized, so I can get behind that point.
Very much so, man. They were dominant in a lot of different ways. Let's move on here, Joe. Let's get to Alabama and Oklahoma, another domination of a game here. Joe, hold on. We had a couple something. Yeah. Fish back up with a $2 super chat says, over-under with Birch beats OSU by even more at the SEC and Notre Dame.
OU. Oh, he's saying
over
that
under
Oregon
with being back that Oregon beats Ohio State.
I don't know if by them. Yeah, I don't have an answer for that game yet, if I'm being honest.
No, well, here's the thing. If you're saying Birch is being back, you're using it as the equivalent of you having a home game because you're not going to play them at home again. You're not.
Yeah, I can't get behind that. We had 2 others.
Yeah, JP says can't wait till the SEC school has to play in South Bend in the now. Blake, how many SEC in college football?
In CFP, I think he means.
Okay. All right. Yep. Go ahead. Talk all the shit you want to. I'm going to sit here and wait. When was the
last time an SEC team had to play in 20-degree weather in Indiana? When was last, or just in 20-degree weather? When was the last time that happened? I mean, I'm not asking you to know. It's a
last
rhetorical
time that
question.
Riley Leonard's thrown for over 250 yards against a Power 5 opponent.
That's not what we're talking about.
No, if you can ask me a question, I get to ask you a question.
Well, they're both hypothetical questions.
No bullshit. All right. Wait until a team can stop you running the football and see what's going to happen. You go right on ahead. Y'all want to be cocky like you always are.
I just don't know.
Get your ass whipped. All right, now.
I just don't know if we can say that so confidently.
I
any
can
of
say
the three teams.
About it.
Maybe Georgia.
As confidently as I said that Indiana was going to get their ass whooped, is as confident as I'm saying.
Notre Dame's better than Indiana. Notre Dame's better than Indiana.
I didn't say that they weren't. But when a team makes you one-dimensional, it's going to make you throw the football. Riley Leonard cannot do it.
Texas A&M tried. Didn't work.
It's game one, Joe. Are y'all going to live off of that?
Yes, because it's the only thing that we have. We don't have anything else. So let's wait till we play the playoff game. Let's wait till we play the playoff game.
Okay. You know what equals out A&M?
What?
NIU. I don't want to hear about it anymore.
Oh, that was week 2. Are you gonna hang up on? That's this is the whole circle that we keep going.
Every time I talk to a Notre Dame fan, it's, what about week 1 against A&M? Well, bitch, what about week 2?
I don't mind bringing that up, but why are we just throwing out the win against Texas A&M? I mean, that Texas A&M win doesn't look as good as
you're missing my point. Y'all want to throw in the A&M game, and you don't want to throw in the NIU game like it never existed.
I don't mind bringing it up. I've never shied away from it. It's a bad loss.
I guarantee you, as God is my witness, Riley Leonard has to throw the football like what Jalen Milroe had to do yesterday, and that's the game we're going to. You're in trouble, buddy. I'm going to promise you that. All right. Joe, Alabama and Oklahoma yesterday, I did not see this one coming. I got to be real with you. Not even remotely close did I see this one coming. But Alabama falls 24-3, and their expectation of the playoffs pretty much dwindles here. Your thoughts on how the game went?
Oklahoma fans are going to hate that I'm phrasing it like this, and frankly, I don't really care. Oklahoma didn't do anything exceptional. I saw the ugly version of Alabama that cost them early on in the season. This is my biggest takeaway. I saw a team that was not playing successfully against the run to the point where they were tackling too high. They weren't finishing through ball carriers. There were a ton of broken tackles. They were missing simple blocking assignments on a lot of plays where they needed just hat on a hat in order to produce yards in short area situations. I think that the lack of effort and poor play by Alabama was summed up by the shitty effort on that screen that was picked off, the first interception that Milroe had, where Prentice is just standing there when he's supposed to be blocking a guy. He just stood there and just kind of gave a light little shove and then watched Oklahoma's defensive back take the ball back. I forget who it was who picked that ball off, but this game is exactly the shit that I talked about early on in the year after the Vandy loss, after the way that they played against Tennessee. Them being in their first year under Kalen DeBoer keeps rearing its ugly head. And DeBoer, it's too late in the freaking season to be making the same mistakes. You played great against LSU, you had all this freaking momentum, and you reverted back to the same shitty product. How? That is on Kalen DeBoer.
I'll tell you how. You ready?
Okay. Yeah.
This is what happens when you have a coaching change and your depth leaves the building. Meaning, okay, he is not, meaning DeBoer, he is not the only one that this has happened to. I remember the SEC West champ in 2022 having this same exact problem. They did not have the depth. I'm going to push back. Oklahoma did something more than one thing exceptionally well. You want to know what it is?
What?
They lined up and ran it right at Alabama. Jackson Arnold had 25 carries. 131 yards. Joe, they kept running the same plays over and over and over again, and it did not matter. For the first time this year, I saw Oklahoma saying, listen, we have 5 wide receivers that are hurt. Jackson Arnold, buddy, your stock rises for me because you didn't have the dudes and the player. Joe, their top 5 wide receivers are out. Okay? That is insane. They said, Jackson, we need you to run the football to win a football game. If you do that, defense is going to step up for you. Not only did he do that, not only was he a selfless player, not only did he do something for the team that's not his strong suit, okay, not only did he put his head down and get tough yards after tough yards after tough yards, and Alabama got gassed, Joe, they held on to the ball for 40 minutes. 40 minutes of time of possession. They lined up and whipped Alabama from start to finish. You can say whatever. We can say, Joe, one team cannot literally throw the football. We saw that in Jackson Arnold being 9 of 11 for 68 yards. They cannot throw the ball. They have no weapons on the outside. There's nothing that they can do. And you knew that coming in. You knew it. And you got pushed around. You were out of assignment. You were out of gap scheme. You weren't making the right plays. And, Joe, I know a lot of Bama fans want to put this on DeBoer. This is a depth issue. When you're trying to roll in defensive tackles and you don't have the depth, you don't have the guys in the recruiting class because so many dudes hit the portal, it was going to rear its ugly head. Now, I thought that they would get through it. I didn't think Oklahoma could do it or Auburn could do it to them. But here we are. By the way, same exact thing happened to A&M yesterday, and we'll talk about them in just a moment. Boy, that Auburn War Eagle at night. This is the 3rd straight year, Joe, that this has happened. I'm just going to throw that out there. But it was the most selfless game I'd see a quarterback play all year.
Yeah, I give Jackson Arnold a lot of credit for the way that he stepped up because you're right. They couldn't throw.
One more point before you go. Can I say this?
Yes, go ahead.
Jackson Arnold did everything I thought Jalen Milroe would do.
Yeah, if you blindly showed me two stat lines, I would have pointed and said that Jackson Arnold was Jalen Miller. I mean, you're right. You're 100% right.
Jackson Arnold had a bad day, 11 of 26, 164 and 3 picks. That's who we would thought it would have been.
I think you're very, very correct, though. I think that a lot of the first year headaches of this being the beginning of a new regime at Alabama, it's all visibly there. And I see a lot of people jumping in and saying that this is the Shula era. You know, this is basically what this is going to turn into, and it's not going to end well.
Nick went 6-6. Well, Nick had to rebuild it. But you had 39, Joe, they had 39 players that transferred.
Yeah. I think it's fair to criticize Kalen DeBoer for the way that they're finishing this year and likely missing the playoff. And at the same time, still being willing to be patient. Like, we got to give the guy three years before we can jump to the conclusion that he's not good enough to coach in the SEC. Because I've seen a coach that has produced some immaculate results. The way that they played against LSU and Georgia for the first half of the game before they almost let Georgia win the game, those are performances that are reflective of that's what the high can be, where you're dominating offensively your opponents. But the problem is that they have to be more consistent. And the way that you establish that consistency, like you're talking about, is they need to develop this roster. They need to go and get more guys. I know that is such a blanket statement that we throw out there a lot, but DeBoer needs to finish this recruiting cycle strong. He can't overcommit to the transfer portal, but needs to have a nice building block transfer portal class. It's all going to come down to the next 2 years. What happens in recruiting? And if there's a slow, gradual regression year over year on recruiting, then we can start sounding the alarm, but it is way too soon in my eyes.
I will say this. I did think he vastly got out-coached. Venables had him in the blender.
Yeah.
Very much in the blender.
100%.
Joe, I agree with everything you said about DeBoer. You need to give him 3 years. He needs to rebuild some things. The problem is that I didn't feel like that he put Milroe in favorable situations either. Like, they kept trying to run.
It was very forced. It was very forced.
Correct. I felt like DeBoer last night tried to fit Jalen Milroe into his system versus his making a system and doing what he needed to do best for Jalen Milroe. That's how I felt. If they're trying to make you one-dimensional, then, Joe, quite honestly, you got to line up and run the football. You got to 3 yards in a cloud of dust this thing until they break. You have to. After the second interception, I know it was the pick six, but after that, it's not as if that you didn't have a whole second half of football left to be played. You completely got away from running the football. You completely pressed, okay, and you did not think that you can get back into the game. The Ryan Williams fiasco. How did you get down in the red zone? Well, you ran the football. Now, there's something that's I'm never going to blame DeBoer on. You're having too many penalties in clutch situations. You were undisciplined during Saban. Now I see fans, that's ain't the Saban era. Bullshit. Saban last year and this team last year was 130th in the country in penalties.
We literally talked about it every single week.
Every single week. That's a player problem. That's something that DeBoer inherited. So players got to correct that. Coaching, if Nick can't do it, I don't know what to tell you. But, Joe, there comes a part where I got to continue. I got to throw this back at you. I tell it to you like once every other week. Brother, we see something in these upsets this year. It's the same story every single week. One team that we think that's going to go into the game and win, the team that upsets them, what do they all three have in common? They're winning the time of possession, they're running the football at a better clip, and they have fewer penalties. Like I think of South Carolina, okay, against A&M. I think about what A&M did against LSU. I think even going into the Big Ten, there's not a lot of upsets. But what did Ohio State do in the final win against Nebraska to win? Well, Joe, they had a drive where they ran the ball for 50 yards. There are things where, Joe, we have gotten so enamored with our system fitting a different style of quarterback. Instead of today's coaches, I feel like so much run the ball.
I agree.
Run the ball. We have got, and to your point, I'm going to not clown Notre Dame on this. This is why I thought Marcus Freeman, as an example, has started to learn from his mistakes. And let me tell you why. A new coach coming into a new situation with a new regime. I felt like Marcus had got away from running the football. Kalen DeBoer is going to have to learn very quickly. Joe, in this league, if you don't line up and run the ball for 3 or 4 yards and play in a cloud of dust, there's too many good athletes on the line of scrimmage that sometimes you got to get those tough yardage. Last thing about DeBoer. He did this already in the national championship game where he got away from running the football. Hey, you're just playing against better defensive lines. I'm with you. I agree. He's got to get depth. He's going to have to learn, though, that at some point you just got to line up and start running the football. 4 yards of carry is 4 yards of carry, my guy.
Well, so we're going to talk about this with Ole Miss in a second, too, for this next game. But before we jump there, look, I completely agree. Right. Before we get, I want to carry that into the next segment because that's like my biggest thing with Ole Miss. I want to close out this segment just by saying this was a week where a lot of teams got caught up, and I think that this has been happening for the past month and a half. And I don't know if it's just I don't know if it's from like a recency bias situation that I'm noticing this. Maybe I'm just like forgetting a lot of things. But I feel like in the current NIL era and the transfer portal era, it feels like way more than ever. And Deion Sanders did a really good job of saying this about his team. It feels like a lot of these teams were reading the headlines and looking past their upcoming opponent. So much so that Mike Elko freaking had a Freudian slip. He had a slip in a press conference coming into the game saying that we're not looking ahead to Texas. And then he forgot that he meant to say that they were paying attention to Auburn. Like, that is the fullest scope of this, is that it feels like all of these teams are hearing all these great things about themselves and they're getting all this praise, and they're not just lining up and playing the damn games. Like, that's what it feels like. This was the victim, or not the victim, what was the cause that victimized all these teams this week, is that there were so many teams that just got so caught up, and Alabama is the latest. They didn't look like they looked like they thought they were playing a Pee-wee team.
Florida and Kansas this week, what do they both have in common?
They ran the ball.
Joe, there
ain't nothing to lose. That's the other thing, too.
Well, I'm telling you, if you can line up and run for 4 or 5 yards of carry and you could just do it religiously, you're going to dominate teams. And like, you're going to – 2nd and 5, dude. I'll never forget Hal Mummy. Hal Mummy was asked when I was coming in, Coach, why do you run the ball on first down every play? Or why do you call a mesh route every on the first play? He goes, because 2nd and 5 is better than 2nd and 10. I never can get that out of my mind in these games, in these situations. All right. Speaking of Ole Miss, Joe, the Florida Gators, back-to-back weeks, take down ranked opponents. Billy Napier and Scott Strickland look like geniuses right now. Do you owe Billy Napier an apology after you called for him being fired?
Hold on. You said the same thing. We had a whole segment where I
deleted all of my Billy Napier fired tweets.
I'll never delete a tweet.
I didn't. I'm just messing. But Florida beats Ole Miss 24-17. Your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, great performance by Florida. I had a couple of Florida fans that were demanding that we give them a little love. And yeah, certainly I have to. They deserve recognition. I have been one of the biggest supporters for DJ Lagway, for a true freshman, for the way that he's played. He's not perfect. He has not been this pure reason why they're winning, because their run game has been really dominant and their defensive line has stepped up and had some tremendous performances. But we got to talk about the Ole Miss angle with this, man, because Lane Kiffin is the freaking king, Blake, of having an opportunity to meet expectations, just to simply meet expectations. The expectations this year, Ole Miss goes to the playoff. They suffered a bad loss early. They rallied with the big win over Georgia. They're on this path. It's perfect. You get to, get a nice little challenge against Florida. You could win it handedly. It's on the road. You feel good about yourself. And he freaking out coaches himself in so many situations. We just talked about Kalen DeBoer getting away from running the football. Lane Kiffin's the freaking king of that. He is the best in college football at getting away from running the football. They did this against Kentucky. And I'm watching this game and I'm like, oh my God, he's doing the same freaking thing. He did the same exact thing. They had 40 plus passing attempts and they just completely stopped trying to run the ball with their running backs. And
in fairness, though, they couldn't run the ball without Jackson Dart. That's the truth.
But the problem
Quinshon
is
Judkins walking out of that door is the biggest miss for him. They went.
I get that. That's true.
They went and got all these dudes on defense, right? The biggest problem is to your point, in crucial games, look at the three that they've lost. Florida, they couldn't run the ball. LSU, they couldn't run the ball. Kentucky, they couldn't run the ball with their running backs. And they lost all three of those football games. The only one they get is Georgia.
So you're 100% correct on that. Them letting Quinshon Judkins leave was a huge mistake and clearly was some sort of a power dynamic shift in the way that Lane Kiffin's personality is. One could assume that he probably wasn't putting up with it, that his star running back wanted more money, and that was what the rumor was. But the fact that we look at this game and Micah Davis has 11 carries, Dominique Thomas has 3 carries, Matt Jones 1 carry, and freaking JJ Pegues has 6 carries in this game and couldn't convert in a number of these short area situations. They knew what was coming. But the problem why I keep yelling about this decision-making and the play calling is that the ball is snapped and you watch Jackson Dart just sit in the pocket. And he is a better quarterback than people are going to be willing to admit that are just going to cherry pick the box score. Because you watch him and he's reading the field and he's looking, he's trying to navigate the pressure that's coming in his face. And nobody's open. Because you know what's easy to defend? When you just drop everybody into coverage and you just get coverage sacks. That's what happened. That's what happened in this game. Lane Kiffin pissed down his leg once again. I'm so freaking annoyed that I keep falling for this shit.
This is how I would recap Ole Miss and their season so far.
Mm-hmm.
Because they had so much success offensively a year ago, all of their focus went on one side of the football. Joe, defensively, they went and got a whole new defensive line. They got arguably the best linebacker in the SEC.
Yep.
And they go and get a really good corner from Alabama in the portal. Let's look what happens when you get dudes, shall we? You had a 3-and-out that you forced in the second half to start off the second half. You make Florida a punt, but you fumble the punt or fumble the punt return. You muff it. Florida gets it. Joe, they get a 3-and-out again. So they've gone 6 plays, and they've only given up a field goal in the second half. A 3-and-out for Florida, a punt, a touchdown, their only touchdown in the second half, a punt and a punt. When they went out and got dudes, they thought offensively that they would be good enough. And quite honestly, in the first half with Trey Harris, let's call it what it is, they were. They don't have the dudes. They're
thinner receiver. They're very thinner receiver.
And running back. They are so focused on beating teams defensively that they forgot about going and getting playmakers. They can't run the ball. Like, you know why Georgia has the success that they do, Lane? Do you want to know why Bama does historically under Nick? Why all these teams have success? Because they can line up and run the football. And, Joe, I got to be real with you. They can't. They simply cannot.
No.
And that has killed them all year long. Jackson Dart was their leading rusher for 14 carries and 71 yards. Joe, he had to do too much. He was rattled because he's having to save the entire game over and over and over again. I say a young quarterback. Joe, he's 21. Okay, I know he's a third-year starter, but he's a 21-year-old kid trying to make plays. Playoffs on the line. Everything's ready to go. And I got to be real with you. They didn't help him at all. So everybody's dunking on Jackson Dart. I see it on social media, and I'm like, what are you talking about? Because you did everything that you needed to do in the offseason defensively that, God forbid, Trey Harris You missed on Juice Wells. You don't have a running game. What did you think was going to happen? So you're putting everything on his shoulders. And here's what pisses me off more than anything. They're blaming him for the entire loss. That is the stupidest thing that I could ever say. No, your coach could not and did not get dudes and run the football. He fumbles the bag more than not. Now, to that point, Joe, I'm going to get to Florida here next, but it's also not as if Ole Miss fans listen, Florida is starting to find a way. When they found out that their coach was coming back and Lagway comes back, Joe, I'm seeing a team that is bought into a head coach, that's bought into a system, and you can't beat them. They're a physical football team. They took it to you.
The turnaround's crazy.
They have confidence. They thought their coach was going to get fired. They have confidence. Look how crazy it is when you have high talented dudes, okay? It's not as if Billy didn't recruit top 10 classes. Joe, he's in the top 10 every year. But the problem was, hey, our coach didn't get him fired. Oh, we're going to run this shit back. Oh, we got Lagway. We're going to smack your ass.
They need to finish in recruiting this year. And I don't disagree with you. The confidence
right now.
The confidence is there, and guys that need to step up are like Tyreek Sapp's a guy that I think is getting better every single week. But before we move on to this next game, I want to just revisit what you just said with Dart. To the losers who looked at the box score and then also tuned in for the final 4 minutes of this game and didn't watch any of it and were trying to shit all over Jackson Dart for the interceptions that he threw. You idiots, don't know anything about football. You didn't watch the game. You don't know how to evaluate anything that you're looking at. Those people are so freaking nauseating to try and listen to. You've got no idea what you're talking about. This kid played his ass off for the first 3 quarters, and we're supposed to throw all of that away because he was forced into situations that were not built for him to be successful. He was sold out by his coach. He was sold out by his receivers that weren't getting open. It's not on him. It's not on the kid. The kid is phenomenal. He played a fantastic fucking game. And we're sitting here blaming him for the performance.
This is the first show that we've said 3 F-bombs in it, but it's worth it.
But okay, this is the one thing I got so pissed off about because I tweeted out about how if there was an SEC quarterback I was going to draft over Quinn Ewers and Carson Beck, it would be Jackson Dart because that kid has so much grit and toughness and has tried to step up to the plate and outperform every difficult situation with his back up against the wall and has been hung out to dry. And all these people were quote tweeting me, be like, "Oh, what a dumbass! Can't believe he said that." It's frustrating sometimes with some college football fans that don't know how the sport works, and they watch 2 plays because they saw it on Twitter.
Yeah, 2 things. I want to get to Florida very quickly here. Number 1, I do love the hype for DJ Lagway and what he's getting. The throw that he made when he was being sacked on a 3rd down and converted on that 3rd down was insane. However, he did throw the two touchdowns to Badger, or one of them Badger. He had 2. Look, he's efficient. He's really good. Some of the throws that Lagway is making, quite honestly, Joe, is insane. He's also had another game below 60%. Okay, so I see all. Hold on. I see all the traits. He's going to be insane. All right. However, he was also a massive reason why they continue to stay in the game. Joe, in the second half, he was 0 for 5 on 3rd down. So 5 of the 7 misses that he had came on 3rd down. So again, just want to tamper down. He's a young kid. He's being thrown into a situation and they're getting wins. Pump a little bit of the brakes. 2 years from now, Joe, when me and you were talking about DJ Lagway, this kid's going to be insane. So, we'll talk about that when we get there. Joe, their playmakers are starting to make plays. This slow build for Billy is starting to play off. This is back-to-back weeks that Caleb Banks, the interior defensive lineman, has 2 sacks plus. He had 2.5 against Jackson Dart in this game. And I thought defensively, dude, I'm like, man, they're kind of moving around a little bit like the way that I noticed that Florida is supposed to. right? Like I'm like, oh shit. Like they're getting after Jackson Dart more than a lot of teams that have played Ole Miss this year, better than Georgia. I mean, I'm like, let's be real. Joe, what is the last couple of weeks for Florida if Lagway doesn't go down? Because I remember the tough game against Georgia when Georgia had to pick the ball off late against a walk-on. I mean, if I'm Florida right now.
Wait, hold on. I don't love to play the whole hypothetical game because, like,
Joe, we were firing him 2 weeks ago, and they were beating Georgia when Lagway went down.
Okay, but this is where, like, we don't know how that game would have played out. That's my problem. I don't like to do that. I don't want to do that.
No, even if they lost, if you're 2-2, which they are, think about this. If I would have told you the stretch that everybody talked about during the season, okay, for Florida, oh man, these last 5 games, Billy's not going to win any of them. Joe, if I would have told you coming into the beginning of the season that they would be 2-2 in the stretch of Georgia, Texas, LSU, Ole Miss. Dude, that's where I'm coming from. But again, by the way, nobody almost close to in the history of football has faced these 5 opponents in a row. Now, Florida State's kind of out of it. They have got 1 win. I mean, Florida State's not that. But look, it's a ranked game on every single one of these against teams that are in the playoff besides LSU, or we're going to get in the playoffs if Ole Miss would have won the game. They have been playing exceptional football when Lagway has been in the game through 4 quarters. Montrell Johnson, I know he's an older guy, but even Ball, you see what they're doing here, man. They have been building and building and building. I get it. You think I'm glazing on Florida. I'm just saying, if I would have told you in the beginning of the year they'd be 2-2 in this stretch, you would say, oh, man, are they 7 wins at this point?
I think it's justified to give them credit. But we need to see, one, the high school recruiting this cycle hasn't been great. I need to know what happens next year because that's what it is. There's nothing you're playing for a bowl game, which is great. You've survived to some extent the difficult stretch of games that you were handed. How do you start next year? That's what this is all decided on. He has survived to live another year. That was all that was required of him. And we talked about this at the beginning of the year. I said that if he goes 7-5, which he's on a trajectory to do right now, then he saves his job. If he goes 7-5 with that schedule, he saves his job. And he's done that.
Well, yeah, he's already done it.
Yeah.
I mean, he's coming back. Again, got to give Billy Napier credit where credit's due here, man.
Yep.
All right. You want to go Colorado and Kansas?
I was thinking Texas A&M Auburn. I was do that.
All right,
one
we can
next.
do that one.
Yeah.
Joe, A&M and Auburn. You know, it's funny. On Wednesday, we talked about A&M and Auburn, and I said I did take A&M. I shouldn't have done it, but what do we always say about Auburn in November at night in Jordan-Hare? Goofy shit happens. We literally spent 10 minutes on this game on Wednesday. And guess what happened? In triple overtime, down go the
Aggies. Wasn't it centuple overtime? Wasn't it the 5th overtime technically? Am I crazy?
Oh, no, you're right. 5 overtime.
Yeah, because they went to that stupid shootout thing that they did.
Yeah, okay. All right, that's my fault. See, even I'm messed up. Okay, 5 overtimes and beat Aggies. Hey, by the way, remember a month ago when the Aggies fans came all up in the show and were making fun of your boy here?
It was 4 overtime. Sorry, it was 4. But sorry, continue.
New year, same Aggies.
Look, I need to stop doing this. I need to stop picking first-year head coaches on the road at night. I'm not doing it again. I need to really dig in a little bit further and say, you know what, this coach is going to lose, and I need to just take the heat face first. I don't care. What happened in this game, though, Texas A&M really crumbled defensively. I thought that they did some great stuff on offense where we saw the big plays. We saw the run game. Marcel Reed made some nice plays, but Cam Coleman, number 1, and this isn't a hot take. I think everyone's going to agree with this. That kid's going to be a star. Talk about another true freshman who had a phenomenal performance and is continuing to emerge and step up. his route running, his feet, the things that he's able to do to create for himself. That kid is unbelievable. And Keandre Lambert-Smith had a great game as well. A&M secondary was completely smoked. They were hung out to dry. They could not only were they beaten in situations where they allowed separation for guys like Coleman to get open, but there were contested catch situations where they were just not able to finish. They were getting bossed up on by these Auburn receivers, especially Lambert-Smith. I don't truly kind of know what to do with Texas A&M, and I'm going to revert to the same conversation that we just had with Caleb.
Alabama.
Yes. You should be patient, especially for the most important part of this. What Texas A&M has done this year is a far more competitive and balanced, not consistent, but when they're playing their best football, showing the potential to be a top 3, 4, maybe even higher team in the SEC on a consistent basis under Mike Elko. Mm-hmm. So we got to give Elko the same level of grace that we're giving to DeBoer. This is not Jimbo Fisher where it's going to be erratic and up and down. Give it time, let him recruit, and let's see how things turn out by year 3.
You know they call him Texas 8-4 for a reason, huh?
Crazy, they're going to finish 8-4.
Well, they might be Texas. We never know. Joe, this is how I felt about the game, the entire game. They're up, they're leaning, they're taking hold. They got a firm lead early. Man, listen, I don't know what to think of Auburn right now, because I look at them and I say, man, I know that Jarquez Hunter had a great game. Boy, that O-line got pushed against a good D-line, man. They really did. I see Cam Coleman, and I'm saying to myself, man, all right. Something happened with Hugh Freeze. Something happened up with the season. They've been recruiting very well. They're getting playmakers. I've seen this story before with you. Dude, I mean, they had dudes. I mean, they were all over the field. Now,
they just need a quarterback. That's their biggest – I didn't mean to cut you off, but, that's the biggest thing is if they figure out what they're doing at quarterback, it becomes a completely different future for them.
Yeah, and listen, they feel like they had that guy in Deuce Knight coming in. I mean, maybe he is going to be that guy and that dude. But, man, I got to tell you, A&M is not a bad football team in either line of scrimmage. And I felt like that had been a lot of Auburn's issues, that and turnovers. Joe, every single week when we would talk about a team that's got to face Auburn in the beginning of the year, we would come out here and say, you know what, man, we're watching them. They're having good plays here, here, and here. But they're turning the ball over. They're 130th in the country in turnover rate. They're 130th in the country in turnover margin. They're not generating turnovers, but Thorne throws too many interceptions. They're fumbling the ball too much. What happens if Auburn doesn't do that? Last night. That's what it looks like. And Joe, I'm not saying that this team is only a quarterback away. They're not. They got a lot of other holes that they need to fill. But my goodness gracious, I felt like I was like, all right. I saw the vision of the Auburn Tigers last night for the first time probably all year. In reference to A&M, I would just say, again, like we talked about with Alabama, when the going got tough, you didn't have the depth. And you had a great play call. Was it the Philly special, I guess is technically the play call, right?
Yeah.
At the end of the game.
Kind of. Well, you're talking about where the Texas A&M tried to run like a reverse. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the Philly special, isn't it? To some extent.
No, because the Philly special would have been thrown to Marcel Reed.
But it's the same play.
Well, yeah, it's a reverse pass. It's a reverse pass that if it was open, he should have caught it.
And he should have caught it. But you found a way to win against a good opponent. Now, Joe, going down this game, I want to point out one thing in reference to A&M and Auburn here. I thought late when A&M had continued to come back, they take a lead. I was like, man, you know what? This is going to be another game that we look at Auburn and say what could have been. Joe, the way that they played down the stretch, they give up the 10 points late. But, man, I look at them and say to myself, man, that field goal late was critical. That stop late was critical. Everything that they did, I felt like for once that I was like, man, they're going to make the play here. I was surprised in saying that about Auburn, but there we were, and that's what happened.
I just keep coming back to what you just said and what I mentioned a second ago, though. Certainly frustrating performance for Texas A&M. It's a promising performance for Auburn. I just feel so locked in thinking, what the heck would Auburn be if they had somebody who was better than Peyton Thorne? I don't mean to poo-poo on Peyton Thorne, but he's been turnover prone. He has been extremely erratic. He made some nice plays, and he played his best game, I think, all season today. But if you were able – yesterday. Don't know what day it is anymore. It feels like it's been one long day this whole season. If you're able to get somebody who's a more efficient decision maker and is better at setting up guys on this team to succeed, this Auburn team does have that potential to be next year one of the best teams. And I don't mean to be too forward looking. Like, I think about, there's a lot of rumored names out there that could be going in the portal. Like, the first one that comes to mind, I'd try to go after Noah Fafita. Like, I would try and get Noah Fafita, who is the epitome of smart decision maker who doesn't risk putting the ball in bad, adverse situations and taking dumb, really bad risks that are going to set up your offense for failure. He is a guy that knows how to distribute. And I think maybe he's not the level of athlete that Hugh Freeze is going to be looking for in his offense, because he probably wants somebody that is, we saw that what he had with Malik Willis. We saw that what he had with Chad Kelly and all that. But if he can get someone like Fafita, who should be hopping in the portal, they need to throw whatever money they can at him.
Does have a lot of bad turnovers.
Who, Thorne or Fafita?
Fafita.
But he was, and I screw them Arizona fans, by the way, who gave me shit for saying that Brennan was a bad coach. Now they're all saying that they should fire him after the first year. That offense that they're putting that poor kid in is completely screwing him over, because he is a great young not young passer, but he's a great passer, and they've completely screwed him over.
Yeah, it's not good. The kid would be
he would do really well in Hugh's offense. I think he would.
Well, it's the Cam Ward effect.
Right.
Right. When you don't have playmakers, what do you think is going to happen?
I mean, he's got McMillan, and that's it. And then they're like asking him to throw the ball, and they got all these kids. Yeah, it's just a bad fit. Speaking
of the Big 12, Colorado goes. Oh, Joe, I've been waiting for this segment, boy. I have been waiting for this segment. But Colorado falls to Kansas yesterday. Devin Neal has 207 yards rushing. He has another 80 yards receiving, and Kansas gets the upset against Colorado. I normally let you start off segments.
Okay.
But I'm not going to let that one happen this time. On Monday, we broke down this game, and we talked about Colorado and Kansas. And boy, did I get hate. Over 400 comments on the YouTube clip of us talking about Colorado. And I was called a lot of things under the sun. I was told that I didn't know football. I don't know what I'm watching. This dude acts like he knows about offensive line play. He doesn't. Joe, on Monday, I came out here and said that Kansas is going to run on this really putrid, at moment in times, Colorado defensive line. I got hammered. By you. You told me you no good Rudy Poo. You don't.
Okay, I didn't say that. I didn't.
And I said Kansas going to line up and run the football right at him. And boy, did they. And Devin Neal, brother, welcome to the show. That man is a dude. Joe, just going to tell you, when you don't want to run the football, if you're Colorado, and you let teams run the ball on you in the second half the way that you do, that tells me that your depth is a problem, and that they're so cocky that they kept running man-to-man yesterday. Late in the game, Jalen Daniels is throwing passes to Neal and man-to-man because he knows that the safeties are not going to be able to cover, or backers are going to be able to cover Devin Neal. And you got pieced apart by a better coaching staff offensively, okay? I am just saying that there comes a place in time where when you decide that you don't want to line up and run the football and get in these kinds of games, you're going to get beat. Tougher teams win, and the tougher team won here.
One thing I just have to, if you're going to try and point out that you were right, I have to bring up, I put Devin Neal in my top running backs ranking at the beginning of the season. I don't think you did. And if I remember correctly, you gave me shit for putting Devin Neal where I had it. No, because I had him at 4, and you were trying to hype up Caleb Jackson, and said the Caleb Jackson should have been in there over. I'm gonna go find that segment after this. I remember you gave me a hard time for.
I'm going to delete the segment.
I'm a big Devin Neal fan, especially for the upcoming draft. I think he's a phenomenal runner, and we saw what he can do to take over a game if he's given the opportunity to succeed. I don't disagree with you. We saw that in this game where there was the circumstance where if Colorado could not step up and play sound run defense, just gap sound defense, played poor to their run fits. They allowed way too much easy progression to Devin Neal and also to Jalen Daniels. I have to at least, though, this is what's going to get missed in all this, and I know that you don't fit into this category because you're not a Colorado hater, and even though a lot of the Colorado fans think that you are, you're not. I think that a lot of Colorado fans or Colorado haters are very quick to look at this performance and to get super excited and happy that their season's done, and they don't want to pay attention to anything and just say like, oh, what another failure. They failed to step up to the challenge. There still needs to be recognized because they're likely out of the Big 12 championship mix with how complicated the tiebreakers are. The accomplishment that Deion Sanders has had to this point in the way that they have progressed this much, the way that they've improved this much, it does need to be recognized. It's something that's going to get missed in this discussion because it feels like it's a complete disappointment that they did not go on to win the Big 12 championship game. But it is still a massive step forward for this team and proof that Deion Sanders is a great coach. And I know you agree with me on that. Mm-hmm. It's just, it was a little too soon. Just a little bit too soon to think that they were ready to finish. And I was all in on them to get the job done. And I got a little bit ahead of myself, and I should have paused for a second, as I said throughout parts of the season, that we need to wait a second before they do actually win the Big 12 championship and go on to the playoff.
Depth in November, man. It's a fickle thing. And when you go in the portal the way that you do and you maneuver the way that you do, depth will finally catch up to you. And Joe, quite honestly, I had seen this matchup before with Colorado. Now, one of the games they won against a team that has no, I know they're in the FCS playoffs. I saw it, the same style and system work for North Dakota State. Guess where I saw it again? Nebraska. And I'm like, wait a minute. What does Kansas want to do here? Now, I didn't think Kansas's back end and DBs, would be able to stop that wide receiver core over and over again the way that they did. Kobe Bryant had 2 PBUs late. Maybe I should have counted more on him. But there comes a part where I have seen this story for Colorado a couple of times where you at the line of scrimmage, you're not good enough right now for a team to lean on you. Meaning over and over again, teams are just running right at you. They don't give a shit. Kansas does not give a shit. They will literally run the ball all day long. And when you do not line up and run the football and you don't care about time of possession, eventually your defense is going to get whooped. Eventually they're going to be too tired. You're going to have to start rotating. Guys are going to make mistakes because they are exhausted. And that is exactly what Kansas did to them. I'd seen it, the matchup. I'm like, man, Nebraska is a tough team. They're not having a lot of success, but they're tough. And they're going to run it right at you. And, Joe, this is what happens and what Kansas has always done best. You mean to tell me you're going to give me 5 yards to carry? Well, then I'm going to line up again and run it right at you. And Devin Neal's going to have a career day. Joe, he had a career day. I mean, bro, he had 287 yards, total yards. That is insanity.
They couldn't have been in a higher, at a higher success rate, a higher EPA per play. 94th percentile for success rate every single time the ball was snapped.
Think about
wait,
this.
Here's the real truth telling thing. The havoc rate, which is a stat that you and I both love bringing up. And for the listener who doesn't know what that is, it means on every single given snap, the rate in which your team is producing sacks, but more importantly, tackles for loss, just creating penetration to generate stops behind the line of scrimmage. They had a 9% havoc rate, which was completely abysmal compared to what they were doing coming into this game. And Kansas's offensive line, they lost their best offensive lineman, Dominic Puny, to the draft last year. Their offensive line is nothing special. So for you to only hit on 9% and to get run over the way that you were, that paints the picture of what exactly happened in this game. They were getting pushed. They were creating space. And as the game snowballed, like we keep talking about here, if you don't have those early stops against the run, and you're not able to produce in the running game the way that you needed to, like Colorado got stopped in some situations, it catches up to you. And eventually, maybe next year, we start to see an improvement in that area because there were certain areas last year that they were having issues with, like their pass rush, that improved drastically this season. There's going to be steps forward on a year-to-year basis.
Not if you don't throw the ball. And run the ball. No,
well, they're gonna have to have a bit of a different approach next year because they're not gonna have Shedeur Sanders, they're not gonna have Travis Hunter, they're not gonna have a bunch of these receivers. Did you say they're gonna have a new head coach?
They're gonna have a new head coach.
Stop it.
They are.
We're not. I really do. I will only think that Deion Sanders would do that is if Shedeur ends up with the Cowboys, and I do not think that Shedeur is going to end up with the Cowboys. I don't.
All right. Dallas does it. He's gone. I'm just telling you. 333 rushing yards for one team, 43 for the other.
I hate how right you are about that because like that's literally it's both things that you were right about, which is infuriating.
Why is it infuriating?
Because I don't like being wrong. What do you mean?
Well,
why is it infuriating?
Because
like you don't like being wrong. Whenever when I'm right on this show, you don't want to.
I'm never wrong.
Exactly my point.
But I am wrong a lot. I'm just joking. But there comes a part there, brother, when you can line up and run the ball. I'm sorry. It's a tale as old as time. A tale as old as time. We just get away from it because we want great cornerback playing. Look at this system that they're running.
This is a year of proof that with as much bad quarterback play that we've had across the country, this is proof that you need to invest. Teams need to, in an era where it's easy to get guys to leave their teams, overinvest at running back. This isn't the NFL. Overinvest. Bring in 3 running backs. Like do whatever you can. Ohio State is the perfect example of what teams should start to do. Plain and simple.
I agree. All right. You want to wrap it up with one more game here?
Yeah, let's do it.
Joe, the outright mayhem that we saw in Tempe, Arizona last night or yesterday.
We're skipping Notre Dame?
Yeah. We'll get to them next. We won't leave until we get to them.
Oh, my God.
Arizona. Let's just do Arizona State BYU very quickly. The mayhem, Kenny Dillingham going off. The now what could be playoff worthy Arizona State Sun Devils.
Here said this.
Kenny Dillingham.
Look, I said this, and the BYU fans are awfully quiet. I had some try to chirp me on Twitter because I was calling them out. BYU is fraudulent. They don't do anything exceptional, and a team that actually was ready to put up a fight did so. This game was a lot more lopsided than it looks in the first half. BYU comes back. There was the whole drama with the field storming. We don't need to talk about that. I got to give my flowers to Kenny Dillingham and what I truly believe that he is one of the bright young stars in this sport. We all remember what Arizona State looked like last year. They lost Jaden Rashada, and they got better. They have been, and they've slipped up a little bit this year. They've got 2 losses, but they have been explosive. They have been physical. They have been commanding. And it all plays to who Kenny Dillingham is as a person. You saw him screaming at the ref because they were telling him that the fans had to get off the field. I'm a big Kenny Dillingham fan. I love the guy. He's 34 and he's doing all of this.
He's our age. He's my age.
He has the demeanor.
Could you imagine me being the head coach of the Sun Devils about to go to a college football playoff?
Exactly. He has the demeanor of like a 65-year-old coach who's getting pissed off and yelling at the refs because he thinks that he deserves more than he's getting. I think that the future is tremendously bright. The fact that this isn't even a cake that is fully baked yet. This isn't a situation where this is what gets completely missed before I let you hop in your Blake. He took over an Arizona State team that's roster was decimated, that was given, I think, a bowl ban last year, and that was under NCAA investigations because of Herm Edwards. He's not Kalen DeBoer, who took over Nick Saban's roster. This man took over a shit team that had nothing. And an alum of the program, he has the pride to turn this team into a Big 12 champion. There is no better story. And I think that with Kurt Signetti losing and Deion Sanders losing, I think he's coach of the year. I think he deserves it.
I'm not going to go that far.
Who else gets it? Elko lost too?
Dan Lanning's over there in Oregon saying,
"Oh yeah, Dan Lanning's probably gonna win it." Yeah.
I mean, hi, how are you? I'm sitting over here. Ryan Day, hey, what if I win the Big Ten? One of the best team in the country. Hi, how are you? Just throwing it out there. Look, Kenny Dillingham, the way that he ended the game, they should have lost. They should have lost. You're trying to run the clock out by running your quarterback all the way back and then throwing it out of bounds. And with 1 second left, you got a Hail Mary that does get completed. And people are missing that they were a yard shy, okay, from winning that football game. I like Kenny. It's like one of us. It's like one of the bros out there coaching. I get it. The way he ended that game was, we'd be talking about one of the worst coaching decisions ever in the history of fumbling a bag and what Kenny Dillingham did. You can't, risky. Cam Scatterboo is my favorite player in the country. There, I said it.
Should have listened to me a while ago.
Yeah, well, you're normally wrong like you were all last week. Oh, by the way, 8-game lead. 8-game lead.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Rutgers goes down. Down goes Rutgers.
I don't know what you're talking about.
On the last play of the game. Joe, if we get in the playoff here, it's going to be over.
I won last year. That's all that matters.
We didn't.
We're even. We're even. Yeah, we did.
Wrap it up here. Joe, Notre Dame takes down Army in a bludgeoning. Your thoughts on the game?
Look, I don't think that there's like a ton to take away from this because a lot of the thoughts that I've had on Notre Dame on a week-to-week basis they've just progressed and they've built. I have said this, and I think most Notre Dame fans are pretty realistic about the outcome of this game. There is a small pocket, and it happens to be the loudest pocket of Notre Dame fans that are trying to act like that this is an impressive ranked win. It's a good win. It is a way to finish out the season against an opponent that if you do not come out firing early, that you could have easily dicked around with them and allowed them to play with you close. And if you won this game by 10, then 1,000% everybody in America would have called into question your legitimacy being in the playoff conversation. But they've done this every single week since the NIU loss. They have understood what their identity was, and you mentioned this earlier. Against NIU, they got away from what they were supposed to be. They got away from understanding that you've got two great running backs in Price and Love and a mobile, strong quarterback with a big frame in Riley Leonard. And if you run the ball with them, you will win football games. And they did that again last night, and they won the football game. If they continue to establish the run the way that they are, and like we keep talking about with all these games, they are good enough to be competitive in the playoff, and we just need to go from there. It's 1 week at a time. That's my biggest thing here. And I don't think it's fair, Blake, to say that they wouldn't be competitive. And I know that you're rolling your eyes and you're shaking your head and stuff, but you just spent an hour on today's show in every single segment talking about all of these teams that refuse to run the football are failing to succeed. They're running the ball as effectively as anybody in the country.
Hold on. Stop. Florida doing what they did is not the same as Notre Dame beating Army.
Obviously.
So don't take all of my words and use them out of context.
I'm not using them out of context.
This is an exception to a rule. Brother, you're playing against a service academy.
I know that. And this is where I get frustrated with just the general discourse of this game is that it's either this is awesome, we beat the shit out of Army, or it's the haters of Notre Dame that say you shouldn't be happy you beat Army.
I'm really not. Here's my realistic thought of them. I have no idea what to make of them because I think I don't know if I've fully seen Notre Dame in a situation where they're going up against a team that has some dudes too.
That's fair. It's a fair thing to say.
And so when I look at them playing Army, we ran the football right down their throats. Yeah, Jeremiah Love's a dude. I'll give you that. He's a dude. The leap that he had in the end zone, I mean, Air Love. That's I'd make him a shoe and call it Air Love. Okay. Problem is, Joe, there are going to be teams that are going to be able to stop them from running the football. Georgia can do it. Hold on.
I just don't like how certainly you're saying that.
Okay. You are warned. I promise to God you are warned. Because when you get in that top 12, there is going to be situations where Riley Leonard has to throw the ball. Bottom line. And whether you want to admit it or not, I don't know what he's going to do. I'm
here to admit that, yes, he's going to have to step up and he's going to have to make plays as a passer.
Okay.
I think that the way that Penn State played against Ohio State is reflective of probably what would happen for Notre Dame if they faced off with one of the top 4 teams. That they would have trouble throwing.
Hold on. You think that this team right now is a 1-yard line away from beating Ohio State?
I think that Penn State and Notre Dame are comparable, extremely comparable.
Well, hold on. Penn State is on the 1-yard line and could not score away from being the number 1 team in the country.
Yeah, I'm not afraid to say that. I don't give a shit. Penn State had Ohio State at home. Ohio State still won the football game because Penn State wasn't good enough to beat them.
You talk about me being a homer.
There's no hope. Look. You can't. They are so paralleled with the production and the success that Penn State has produced. They have similar roster construction, very similar. 2 really good running backs, a mobile quarterback, a creative offensive coordinator, good offensive line play. Their offensive lines are very comparable. The only singular difference that I will give the benefit of the doubt to Penn State is that Notre Dame does not have an Abdul Carter. They've got Howard Cross, who's really good, but he's not as a premier player as Abdul Carter is. That's the only difference.
Oh, buddy.
I keep coming back to this, and every Notre Dame fan's frustrated.
You're gonna get your heart broken.
We can't help who we've played. We can't. We beat an SEC team on the road, and I get that shit was in week 1, and we can't hang our. I'm not saying that that's all that is all the evidence in the world that we win a playoff game. That's not what I'm saying. But it's at least evidence that we can play a tough game against a top team in one of the other in the best conference in college football. Is it not?
In game 1 under a new head coach, and the quarterback has changed. Joe, what have we learned about this? What have we learned about A&M? Okay, that we didn't know in week 1, that Connor Wigman would be benched for a true freshman.
Marcel Reed's not a true freshman.
He's a redshirt freshman? Are you sure Marcel Reed's not a true freshman?
I'm pretty sure he's not a true freshman.
All right, well, look it up. Because I really want to know. I really desperately need to know if Marcel Reed's a true freshman. Taking you some time here. But
no, redshirt freshman. He was here 2023.
Okay. regardless, a redshirt freshman. I have not seen you back in a situation where you played a quarterback in a system and an offense where the quarterback got benched. That's how bad it had been. Okay? So I'm with you. Say whatever you want to say. You have not gone week to week with these teams. I know that there are teams, let's say not stop, let's say contain your running game because they're going to make Riley Leonard beat them by throwing the football. They're going to put players in the box and they're going to force you to throw the ball over and over again. And if you think, I mean, Joe, who's the fifth team in the country to you right now?
Actually, I don't even know if I can answer that question clearly.
Is it Georgia?
Yeah, it's probably Georgia.
Uh-huh.
Notre Dame is probably going to end up being the 6th or the 7th seed, and they're going to get a home game.
Okay.
They're probably going to get Tennessee, or they're probably going to get Penn State.
Okay.
Those are winnable games.
Okay.
You're telling me that with Notre Dame's defense is good enough to disrupt
Nico
and to turn over Nico and Drew Allar. They both are.
I'm not really talking about Penn State, if I'm being honest, because I'm not.
But Notre Dame's not going to get. I don't disagree with you. I don't think Notre Dame would beat Oregon or would beat Ohio State or would beat Georgia. I don't think that they would beat Texas.
One of those teams are going to lose.
But the rest of the playoff field, I believe that Notre Dame has a legitimate shot against. If they played Indiana, they beat Indiana. If they played Alabama, they beat Alabama. I think that they can beat Alabama. I'm not saying they will. I'm saying that they have the capability to.
On November the 24th, the Sunday before Thanksgiving, I'm coming back to this, and I will clip this one for you.
All right. We had a couple of super chats.
All right, hold on. Hold on. You're not going to – don't you dare stop my point. I'm going to come back to this moment and tell you I was yet right again.
If Notre Dame loses a close playoff game, though, that doesn't count as a victory.
Okay.
You better hope they get blown out. And they're not going to get blown out.
There's going to be a bad matchup for them. They're going to need Riley Leonard to throw the football, and he can't do it. I'll bet an entire life savings on it.
I can at least say confidently that Notre Dame is not the type of team that is built to get blown out in the playoff.
All right.
I don't. Okay.
Tim Ray with a $5 super chat says if Penn State and Minnesota was an SEC game equals gritty win. Since it's Big Ten, PSU is a fraud. Ridiculous. Remember when we pretended UK was good? Good SEC times. Who called Penn State fraudulent?
I don't think any of us did. I think that was just a general. A lot of people were doing that.
I think fraudulent.
No, yeah, and look, I think that is a good win, and that was what we talked about.
I talked the best loss in the country.
I talked about in the preview was that I was trying to mention that the game was going to be a lot closer because Minnesota has some good athletes. Daniel Jackson had a good game, like I said in the preview. So yeah, it is a good win. It's one that deserves to be recognized.
You also said Penn State was getting blown out. Beef Six says Blake, the SEC homer, how that poo pile feel after all that after all that shit that got pushed in over the weekend. You want a 3-loss SEC in the playoffs now. If you beat Joe, think about this. If Florida was going to be 9-3 with everything that we said in the beginning of the year, if they would have played and beaten 4 ranked teams down the stretch, we would be saying the same thing about them. Same thing. You know it, and I know it.
I disagree. I'm not going to
extrapolate because
we'll be on here for another hour.
You literally tweeted, Clemson and South Carolina has some SEC. No, it
does. And I think that South Carolina is the only team that has an argument. And if they win that game and if other things happen next week, that there's a possibility for it.
Mm-hmm. JP says, does Kelly go after Deuce after losing the number 1 QB? I doubt it. I think they go forward.
Yeah, he hasn't been rumored there at all.
Well, I mean, nobody's ever been rumored here besides Bryce Underwood. Bryce Underwood.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's what it is. All right. We'll see y'all tomorrow, man. Y'all have a good night. Oh, rivalry week. Oh, it's a big week. Joe, it's a big week. A lot of hatred going on this week. I like it. Oh, we got Thanksgiving. Oh,
Good week.
See y'all tomorrow. Peace.